Imagine a man, a loser in life, who gets caught up in trying to impress his crush, only to find himself on an island where the people are smaller than his fingers, and his actions make him a hero. That's the story of today's movie. The film begins with Gulliver waking up in his tiny New York City apartment, his confidence even smaller than his room. As usual, he talks to his toys as if he were a superhero, heats up his food in the microwave, and dances to his favorite music while showering. He then gets ready and goes to his office, where he's been working for almost 10 years. Even after all these years, he's still given only menial tasks, delivering parcels, moving files around, and helping the rest of the staff with small chores. Sometimes he feels like his hard work goes completely unnoticed. One day, he meets a new employee, Dan, and the two quickly become good friends. Gulliver is Dan's senior, so Dan respects him, but due to Gulliver's lack of confidence, he never acts like a boss. The two go around the office delivering letters and parcels. During this time, they pass by Darcy, Gulliver's longtime crush. Gulliver has liked Darcy for years but has never mustered the courage to talk to her. Seeing her makes Gulliver nervous, and Dan notices this. Then Dan learns that he's been promoted, even though he's only been at the office for a short time. On the other hand, Gulliver, who has been working there for 10 years, hasn't even been noticed. Dan frankly tells him that he doesn't get promoted because he's always afraid and doesn't put himself forward. Hearing this, Gulliver leaves the office feeling dejected. While walking outside, he sees that Darcy is still working in her office. He gathers his courage and goes to her cabin, thinking he'll talk to her. But as soon as he enters, he gets nervous and can't say anything, suddenly asking for a travel writing form. Darcy is surprised. She smiles and asks if he's truly interested in travel journalism. Hesitantly, Gulliver says yes, and that night he goes home and sits down to work on the assignment. But instead of writing it himself, he copies and pastes a lot of content from the internet. The next day, when he gives his assignment to Darcy, she's very happy and thinks Gulliver is a great writer. So she gives him his first real assignment, to write a report on the Bermuda Triangle, a place famous for its mysterious occurrences. To impress Darcy, Gulliver immediately agrees. Darcy arranges all his documents and even a boat. The next morning, Gulliver arrives in Bermuda, where a man gives him an automatic boat and tells him that sailing is very easy. Gulliver starts his journey with full confidence. For the first few hours, he enjoys looking at the sea, reading magazines, and taking pictures, feeling very brave. Gradually, he falls asleep, but when he wakes up, the weather has completely changed. The sky is pitch black, there's a strong wind, and a huge wave is approaching. Seeing the fierce storm at sea, Gulliver panics and quickly puts on a life jacket. But before he can do anything else, a giant wave overturns his small boat and pulls him into the depths of the ocean. The stormy water spins him around and drags him downwards, and suddenly everything goes black. He doesn't know how much time passes, but when he regains consciousness, he can't move his body and feels that his hands are tied with ropes and there's sand beneath him. As he lifts his head, his eyes widen in disbelief because there are tiny people climbing all over his chest, about 3 inches tall, carrying swords. One of them comes forward and introduces himself as Commander Edward. As he understands the situation, Gulliver sees that tiny soldiers are standing all around him, having tied him to the ground with thin ropes. Then the commander calls him a monster and tells him to remain calm. The order is given, but Gulliver, lying unconscious in the field, stirs slightly, and as he moves, all the ropes break, and he stands up. He thinks he's dreaming, so he closes his eyes, hoping the dream will end when he wakes up. But Edward angrily orders the soldiers to attack, and tiny arrows rain down on Gulliver, causing him to fall backward, and he loses consciousness again. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself tied to a wooden cart, being pulled by many soldiers towards the city of Lilliput. Along the way, people come out of their tiny houses to see the giant man. Children run behind, and people climb onto rooftops to watch. After some time, Gulliver is presented before the king of Lilliput. The king sits on his small throne and observes him, while his daughter, Princess Sophia, steps forward and expresses concern for Gulliver, asking Edward why such force is necessary. Edward, already jealous of Gulliver, lies to the king, claiming that Gulliver is a spy from an enemy kingdom and a potential threat to the state. Gulliver, frightened, quietly asks where he is, to which the king's secretary proudly replies that he is standing in Lilliput, the greatest empire in the world. The next day, Gulliver is placed under a large rock, which isn't exactly a prison, but was specifically designed to keep him confined. There, Gulliver meets a kind and gentle Lilliputian named Horatio, who had been punished by Edward. Horatio tells Gulliver that Edward is punishing him because he is in love with Princess Sophia. Gulliver feels sorry for Horatio and secretly promises to help him. A short while later, Edward himself arrives and threatens Gulliver, saying he could keep him imprisoned for life if he wanted to. After this, Edward takes them both to the fields, trying to show off his power, but suddenly, the sounds of an attack from the enemy kingdom erupt, and chaos ensues. Cannons are firing, soldiers are running, and news arrives that the palace is on fire, and Princess Sophia has been taken captive. Edward, trying to appear brave, shouts that he will save the princess and prevents any soldiers from moving forward. At that moment, Horatio quickly tells Gulliver that Edward will never make it in time. Hearing this, Gulliver, without hesitation, rushes forward, easily clearing the small soldiers out of his way, and runs straight towards the burning palace. The fire was raging, and timbers were falling, but Gulliver, using his large hands, makes his way inside and carries Princess Sophia out. The Lilliputians cheer, but the king and his secretary are still trapped inside, and the smoke is thickening, and the fire is out of control. In a last desperate attempt, Gulliver does the only thing he can. He extinguishes the fire by urinating on the palace. This scene, as strange and embarrassing as it is, was also necessary, as it saves the king and the palace. Now Gulliver becomes a hero to all of Lilliput, and the people cheer him, and the king also praises him. Gulliver was grateful, and the applause wouldn't stop. People all around were cheering happily. The king had survived, the princess was safe, and Gulliver, for the first time in this tiny kingdom, stood as a true hero. In his joy, the king also freed Horatio from prison, and thanking Gulliver, invited him to a royal banquet that night. But Edward was seething with jealousy at Gulliver's growing popularity. At the banquet, the king, laughing, asked Gulliver where he was from, and Gulliver, who had never received so much affection before, suddenly blurted out that he was not just from Manhattan, but the president of all of New York. The people cheered and applauded, believing his words to be true, everyone except Edward. In honor of Gulliver, the people of Lilliput built him a large house like those in New York, where he could live comfortably. They also built him a magnificent theater so the entire kingdom could gather and hear the story of Gulliver's life. In the theater, Gulliver told everyone his story, like the one about the Titanic, and how he was trapped on a sinking ship, how the waves carried him away, and how he escaped death and returned alive. The people were amazed by his story, and everyone praised his bravery. Edward stood there listening to everything, his jealousy burning like a fire. The next day, Horatio, who was deeply in love with Princess Sophia, asked Gulliver for help in impressing the princess. Gulliver, with his newfound confidence, helped him, and Horatio truly won the princess's heart. But on the other hand, Edward also had his eyes on the princess and wanted to marry her at any cost. Meanwhile, Lilliputian soldiers found Gulliver's belongings on the seashore, his phone and his broken boat. Gulliver went to retrieve his phone, and as soon as he turned it on, he heard many angry voicemails from Darcy, complaining about his fake articles, his sudden disappearance, and his leaving everything without a word. Gulliver's heart sank, and he couldn't face Darcy. Out of fear, he reluctantly says that he will stay in Lilliput forever. Hearing this, Edward's jealousy intensifies. Meanwhile, the king appoints Gulliver as the general of the army. Now the entire army is under his command. Enraged, Edward disables the city's defense system. As soon as the defenses are weakened, the enemy soldiers launch a surprise attack. The sound of small cannons echoes throughout the kingdom, and as the general, Gulliver has to take command of the entire army. Hesitantly, he wades into the water and grabs the enemy ships, throwing them ashore. The cannonballs fired at him bounce off his stomach and land on the enemy ships, leaving Gulliver unharmed. He pushes the enemy soldiers away, and Lilliput once again celebrates his victory. The people massage him and cut his hair, showering him with affection. Meanwhile, Princess Sophia also begins to like Horatio. Seeing this, Edward's anger reaches its peak, and he flees to the enemy kingdom. And seeing Gulliver's boat-building magazine and the design of his broken boat, the enemy engineers get the idea to build a giant robot. The enemy state helps Edward, and in a few days, a giant metal monster is ready, an iron monster that can match Gulliver's size. The enemy attacks again, and this time Gulliver thinks he will fight the small soldiers as before, but as soon as he enters the field, a giant robot stands before him. Edward is sitting inside the robot. His voice booms like a monster through the speakers, and Edward openly challenges Gulliver. Gulliver has no choice but to accept the fight. He tries with all his might to push the robot back, but this iron robot is far more powerful than him. The robot grabs Gulliver by the stomach, lifts him up, and defeats him in front of the people of Lilliput. Falling down and suffering humiliation, Gulliver confesses in front of everyone that he had told many lies, that he is not the president, nor the hero of the Titanic, nor a great warrior. He is just an ordinary man who was making up stories to hide his weaknesses. Hearing this, the king and the people of Lilliput are shocked. Edward becomes even more ruthless and banishes Gulliver to a distant island. Gulliver is carried away by the sea currents to a place where even larger giants live. A little girl, many times bigger than Gulliver, picks him up like a toy and puts him in her large dollhouse. She makes him sit next to her tea set and starts playing with him, and Gulliver feels like a helpless toy. Meanwhile, Darcy also reaches the same island while searching for Gulliver, but when Edward finds out that Darcy has arrived, he also imprisons her. Edward had also imprisoned the king and queen and seized all power. Knowing all this, Horatio the giant comes to the island and tells Gulliver everything. Just then, the little girl. In the toy chest, he finds an old soldier's parachute, which Gulliver uses to escape. Then, together, they free Darcy and the king and queen from captivity. Gulliver arrives in Lilliput and first meets Darcy, finally confessing his true feelings for her, telling her he loves her and doesn't want to hide anything from her anymore. The next day, Gulliver challenges Edward to a duel again, this time not for his own glory, but to protect the people of Lilliput. The two face off once more. The robot starts to overpower Gulliver, but Horatio secretly sneaks inside the robot and cuts its power lines. As soon as the robot shuts down, Gulliver knocks it over, and the people rejoice. The king restores Gulliver's honor, and Horatio is granted permission to marry Princess Sophia. However, an enraged Edward tries to seize the princess, but she slaps him, and Edward is imprisoned forever. Darcy kisses Gulliver for the first time, and the animosity between Lilliput and Blefuscu ends, and the two kingdoms become friends. Then, Gulliver and Darcy repair their boat and return to New York. A few weeks later, Gulliver quits his old job and becomes a travel writer. He and Darcy live happily ever after, and the film concludes with a heartwarming happy ending.